Dogecoin he's holding recently?
Not that I'm aware of. Okay, so do we go right to the big tech stories, or there actually was some significant Ukraine-related stories that came out in the past 24 hours, right? Like when we heard yesterday, the International Criminal Court is ramping up on wanting to get Putin, and but did anyone see any Ukraine-related stories since we met last time that they want to share? Anybody? Going once, going twice? Somebody must have saw something, no?
About Bucha, yeah, the massacre. So Biden said Putin should be faced the war crimes trial. I don't know if you ever, any of you saw those photos. They killed kids under 10s and they tied the hands of the kids. It's unpleasant. But so at least Biden said in public that Putin should face the crime. But at the same time, Zelensky said it's possible that this would make the peace talk even harder for them. Yeah, a quick update for them.
Okay. Well, 3 hours ago, there was a headline that Russian convoys in Donbass are now being pounded by Ukraine forces. So if the Ukraine forces that pushed back Russian forces near Kyiv are now being reallocated in the Donbass region, which is highly possible, then we might start to see a turning of the tide there in the eastern part of Ukraine. I imagine that's very likely to happen. Okay.
Bulgaria has decided to donate both helicopters and tanks and more weaponry, especially SAM related, as a surface-to-air missiles. So that was something that hit the news about 12 hours ago or so.
Okay. Biden calls for Putin to face war crimes trial. That's the BBC headline from 7 hours ago.
Is that before or after he gets assassinated? Because that was the last week's thing. Is this going to be different next week?
There was a satellite images. Russia is claiming that it's all fake news, right? All of these war crimes in north of Kyiv in that area. But satellite, there's a headline that just came out a few hours ago saying that satellite images prove that Russia's mistaken. Essentially, there's satellite evidence that this happened
And
while Russia was on
that
the ground.
that satellite evidence could become the pivotal piece of evidence at The Hague, because an outright denial of something that is absolutely provable by satellite imagery lends credulity to every other claim denied
Mm,
by Putin in the war crimes tribunal.
mm.
Can I make a
The,
point? I didn't even want to bring because you guys want to be on this issue. So I mean, I was trying to avoid even commenting on it, but um, this idea that somehow you're going to be able to put Putin on trial realistically is not going to happen unless he gets thrown out of Russia. Okay, so I think the problem or the issue isn't so much whether there were war crimes committed or not, whether he's responsible or not, is realistically how do you put the head of a country that's a nuclear power on trial, because who's going to serve him up? And so the head of the war crimes tribunal, I think it was the day before or the day before that, said, well, we put Milosevic on the trial, well, we indicted Milosevic while he was still president of Serbia. But at the end of the day, he was so unpopular in Serbia he had to give up the presidency. Okay, and it was ultimately the Serbs that turned him over to international authorities. Nobody went in and got him. Okay, no one's going to go into Russia and grab Putin unless you want an absolute World War III. And I've been somebody that's probably been a little bit more um, hawkish about what we need to do in Ukraine, regardless of the potential of a World War III. But I certainly would never advocate trying to go grab Putin in Russia. So
Mm.
unless the Russians want to throw him out and give him up, okay, he's never going to be on trial. And I think that problem now weakens the whole idea of having an international court, that there's some sort of international criminal justice system that can bring people to trial in this type of situation. And I'm not sure I would have actually gone there, because it shows the weakness of it, because you can't go in there and grab him, okay? Particularly because they're a nuclear power. So
Eh,
I
But
anyway.
but
in the case of Milosevic, he was tried in absentia, and did it not influence the trajectory of his presidency? Did it not help take him out of
No,
power?
no, no. But he was tried, John. You have to look at the timeline. I believe he was indicted in his, in a, he was indicted while he was president, but ultimately it was the Serbs themselves that gave him up. Okay, nobody sent an invading army in there to grab him. He wasn't grabbed on a beach in South America when he was traveling. They gave him up. They turned him over themselves. Okay, so
Yeah, I agree. Just to support Ken on this one, the Sudanese leader, Omar al-Bashir, he was actually wanted by the ICC and didn't travel for years and didn't give him up. In fact, South Africa got in trouble because the AU allowed him when the African Union meeting happened in South Africa, I think just before COVID. They allowed him to go, but they refused to hand him over. And a lot of South Africans said, "Why did you do that?" And there was a lot of chaos that happened, but they didn't. So he snuck out before he got caught up. And in fact, they did a separate secret flight because the opposition party were even trying to make some fuss to get him arrested and be handed over. And yeah, I think it was before Mariposa, the current president, I think it was Zuma. They actually made a special flight out of a secret airport, and then he flew back to Sudan. And he hasn't even still been handed over, with the military taking over after the a lot of chaos and unrest happening, and then it was overthrown, imagine. And then the civilians have been really fighting to get a civilian leadership. It has been happening for months and still didn't happen. And then the civilian leader, prime minister, who was co-chairing, he resigned, and the military didn't hand him over, so he's still there. So I really do agree with Ken. Until the citizens hand him over, no one else can force him.
and
Yeah,
by the
I
way,
agree with Ken too. It's going to take a while short of an assassination. And we just have to look that it took 6 years, ending in December of 2020, a year ago, for the 123 nation International Criminal Court in The Hague to issue a preliminary report on the Russian crimes in eastern Ukraine dating to 2014. So this is going to take a very long time. It's really going to do nothing.
And by the way, what Jorge said, that 123 countries, neither the United States nor Russia is a signatory to that agreement. Okay, and
Or
the
China.
United States,
Yeah.
excuse me,
Or China.
which that could be also, yeah. I know the U.S. and Russia are not, and one of the reasons that's been so debated in the United States, the United States is not very popular in a lot of parts of the world. There are a lot of countries that would want to bring an American president on trial for what they would consider war crimes that maybe we wouldn't. Okay, in the United States, so it's a very different situation. When you're dealing with world powers like the U.S. and the USSR, and I actually would encourage. I'm going to bring this up. I mean, you could get it on HBO Max if you have it, or you can rent it on $2. Episode of The West Wing from years ago, but still very relevant on this whole debate about war crimes tribunals and everything. And it's season 3, episode 5. I looked it up yesterday because I thought this would come up in conversation somewhere. And it's called War Crimes, and it's there's a particular section of that episode where the White House chief of staff is having a debate with the general of the Air Force about whether the U.S. should essentially sign this agreement that would subject Americans to war crimes. And I don't want to give spoilers away, but it's Gerald McRaney playing the Air Force General John Spencer, who plays the White House Chief of Staff. You guys, if you have an opportunity, if you can get that episode, either because you have HBO Max and all the West Wings are on HBO Max, or you can go, rent it for $2 on YouTube TV or something. You should go take a look at that episode and that particular clip. I tried to get the clip on the web, and hoping it was being available, and I would have, copied it, but I can't find that particular clip on the web for free. But it's a very pertinent, interesting conversation that mirrors real life right now. So thanks.
I'm sorry, I don't agree fully. I think it would be great if we could pull them by their hair and bring them in front of the court. But I think it's important, especially I watched a documentary recently about uh, Ivan the Terrible from the Holocaust, from the killing camps. He was in prison in Israel in between, but in the end, in the end, because of trials back and forth, he died without being fully seen as in like a criminal or having crimes against humanity, and this was quite horrible for the victims. That he died because of German law. If he dies before the trial is over, he can't be considered as judged to commit these crimes. And just having the name in history that a person committed a crime against humanity, I think has a big impact, because those type of people want to go and be in history books and seen as some hero or somebody that brought Russia the territories back and stuff like that. And this is quite impactful for these type of people that want to go in history in a certain way, but will be going down in history as a war criminal or doing crimes against humanity. I think it still has an impact and value for also for the victims.
The problem is that, like Ken has been saying, it is really, really politicized already. So a lot of African leaders, for example, have been complaining the ICC has been anti-African, and that a lot of the people who have been charged or accused of charge to appear to the International Criminal Court has been a lot from Africa and nowhere else. Even though we talked about Milosevic. Yeah, sure. Sorry. Did I interrupt someone? I'm sorry.
Nope.
Oh, okay. I thought I heard something. But anyway, what I have been trying to say is a lot of African leaders, especially the AU, why, in fact, many African leaders didn't push for al-Bashir to be handed over for crime against, humanity and war criminal, is that they really, really do feel like that the ICC was really set up against them, so that it hasn't been evenly applied to globally, especially like Ken said, in the US. They are saying that whenever they feel like it, they actually participate, or when they don't feel like, really active, and by the law and by the rule participants, especially when we talked about, what happened in the Iraq war, and the secret files that came out later on by Snowden and other things. So there is a huge politicization of the issue, that it just became not just a fairly applied thing. So everyone will say, well, no, I didn't do this. It's just that it's political and they made up the story. And even though you have evidence, there is always that feeling, especially if you come to Africa, being in Ethiopia, where twice or at least once a year the AU meeting happens. These things always come into discussion, and that's why they don't want to sometimes be participating in handing over someone being accused. I'm done. I'm
Well,
done
well,
speaking. Sorry.
it's even if you could agree to the facts that something happened. For example, we've had some of our American drone strikes that have missed, and they've hit civilians. Now, I think most of us would believe that that was not intentional, but nonetheless, the civilians are dead, and the United States very often will own up to that. Okay, but there'll be other countries that say, fine, now try the American president or an American general for war crimes because some drone that was supposed to hit a combatant hit civilians. That's where you could end up with this because and that's why I'm telling you I don't want to give away all the spoilers and everything, and they don't come to the episode, but really watch that episode and watch that interchange. You get both sides of the issue. It's very interesting and very thought provoking. No matter what position you have on the issue, it's an
There's
incredibly interesting debate.
the
This
art.
this is I just wanted to say real fast that maybe this is about a medium, a short term, and long term. So I was thinking that the war crime, I say not approach, but activities also may have some impact on whatever the negotiation is for whatever settlement, whatever happens. That maybe Russia would not be able to gain any land because of any pending or actual indictment. So I'm thinking there's probably more to this, and I'm sure those who know international law would be able to dissect this. So I think there's probably a lot bigger picture here. This is Valerie. I'm done speaking.
Yeah, but Valerie, Zelensky's actually saying the same thing, but in a different way. Zelensky's saying we may not be able to cut the deal to end the war if all of a sudden you're going to go after Putin after the war. Okay, he's almost saying that probably has to be on the table, like some immunity to get the Russians to voluntarily pull back.
So either way, complex.
The article
Yeah,
we read,
but
we,
just the last would say is in the US, it's not even the US president in general, but even when the soldiers were accused of, the crimes they committed against the small civilians, that America said, the US said, no, forget it, that's not going to happen on our watch. So when they do that type of thing, when it came and it was egregious, we saw that the peeing or whatever of the corpse and things, all those things, it was out there for the public to see. But then they said that no, I'm not handing over to ICC. So now, how do you enforce when others do similar things? That's the issue.
the article we read 24 hours ago was the former lead prosecutor of the ICC saying that there should be a global arrest warrant for Putin. And Putin is insisting that he go to the G20 gathering of the 20 largest, I think it's economies is how they rank that generally, later this year. Which, if there's a arrest warrant for him, then ostensibly it would have an impact, even if he wasn't able to be arrested. It would prevent him. He would be in house arrest essentially within Russia, and not able to leave, and that would have notable consequences, like not being able to attend UN General Assemblies or G7s or G20s. I guess it was not even part of the G7 or the G20 and other events like that. So, and there's a call to try and get him out of the G20, by the way. China still wants him in, but none of the other 19 or 18 seem to want him to stay in. So, shall we get into the big tech headlines as we always do? Are we ready for that? Did anybody have one that they want to make sure we get into? I think we can all guess what the top story is today, because Cal just hosted a room on it right before we got here. Oh, sorry, wrong file. So here we go. Here's your air. So the top story today, Tuesday, April 5th, is that Twitter appoints Elon Musk to its board after Musk purchased a 9.2% stake in the company 24 hours ago when that was announced. Some of the details include that Musk cannot own more than 14.9% of Twitter while on the board. And when Elon Musk himself tweeted about this, saying, and pay attention to what he says, because even in this tiny little tweet, he already softly potentially validates the main point that I'm making that I think nobody else is making. pay attention closely. If you joined us whenever we started this today, if you joined us 30 minutes ago, you heard me make a little bit of a prediction as to why Elon joined Twitter. And now in this tiny little tweet that he just made about joining, buying Twitter. Well, here's the tweet. You tell me. Just a recap for those who might have missed, because the room's doubled in size since then. The little winky wink nudge nudge that I'm giving everybody is, we already know. We've been tracking that Twitter's working behind the scenes rather diligently on some significant changes around digital products and services that are purchasable on the platform, so that every user will have a wallet, probably a digital wallet, probably a crypto wallet, to enable the purchase and transactions of products and services. And Twitter very quickly becomes the most used place for transacting with digital currencies, because you have a reason to, because there's digital products and services to transact about. That's what they have on the horizon, if you've been paying close attention to this for a while. As a shareholder myself, I have been. So watch this little tweet from this guy, Elon Musk. He says, and I quote, "Looking forward to working with Parag and Twitter board to make significant improvements to Twitter in coming months." Now, how would he know? How would he know there's significant improvements coming to Twitter in coming months? What are these significant improvements in the coming months that he's referring to, if not other than the ones that we know that are coming in the coming months, that I just got done talking about 30 minutes ago? Okay.
If you see the tweet of Parrot before Elon Musk's reply, you will see that they have been talking for weeks.
Yes. In the background, Elon and Twitter have been talking for weeks. And during those talks, he found out about Twitter's product roadmap, where they're going to make a rather potentially significant change, which, as I've been saying for months, in fact, a year, I've been saying. And Cheryl was with me in the room when I asked Twitter's CFO, is it possible that Twitter's going to roll out a functionality where every user will have a digital wallet to transact with, potentially Bitcoin, with Lightning, or what have you, and have products for sale and services for sale. And we've watched those, and since that time, we've seen headlines that confirm all of those suspicions that I had. And now my suspicions are that that product roadmap that's about to happen any month now, which could, my own words back then was, this would give the real use case that everyone's been eagerly waiting for cryptocurrencies, with a really diverse international audience on a digital platform trading all the time. And once you start doing that, then when you have a friend, and you want to buy somebody's car, you need to pay somebody some money, whatever, you, instead of saying, hey, why don't what's your bank account number? You'll just be like, oh, hey, what's your Twitter account? Oh, here, let me just send you from my Twitter wallet to your Twitter wallet. And now bada boom, bada bing, Twitter is a major player in finance when people are using it as a default way for storing and sending currencies to each other, because it's got your identity in some part. And then there's a whole lot of interesting things happen when you have a whole lot of users with a whole lot of storage of their value in those accounts. Let me unpack that. Twitter accounts today have no wallets attached to them, really. They will very soon. That's my prediction. And I asked the chief financial officer that, and his response essentially confirmed it. So Elon built a company called PayPal where he was trying to do exactly that. Precisely exactly that. He's been working on this since the goddamn 80s, people. Wake the fuck up. You don't think he's going to be a little excited about the fact that that vision that he's had since, I don't know, since he was 12 years old is finally about a month away? And he just bought $3 billion of a startup? Like, that he's never really... This is a seemingly an uncharacteristical thing that he's doing? Perhaps not. Perhaps this is supremely logical. And he's genuinely jumping out of his chair with excitement about what we've been watching Twitter lay down the breadcrumbs over the past many months. And here it comes. And it's about to happen. And it could be a really interesting game changer. And I imagine he's genuinely excited about it. And it could have... he can... going back to my point, when Twitter users today don't have wallets, when every Twitter user has wallets, and those are active wallets, and now you've got this open... the thing PayPal doesn't have is a social network, and could never build, but always wished it could have. Twitter is a social network that's about to add the financial layer. When all of us have wallets, oh, by the way, go ahead and click on my account, on my face, you'll see my account, and you'll see I do have a wallet. And you can send me Bitcoins and Ethereums to my wallet right now live. That's how close this is to happening. And imagine when everyone has that. The other thing that's missing that will be in my account next month is just below my face and above my top tweet, there will be a carousel of products and services that you can buy and purchase in real time, which is my own personal Amazon profile, essentially. Twitter will now be competing with Amazon because my products and services, everybody will now have a place to sell shit on the internet. Super crazy simple. The easiest, simplest place to sell anything will be your Twitter account at all times. Every business, every person with a digital wallet. Now, when we all have digital wallets and we've all got currencies that we can all send to each other all the time, do you think PayPal will be able to compete with that? Do you think people will get in the habit of buying things from each other? And when you decide to, in the future, that you need to send payments to somebody for anything, you're at a swap meet or whatever. Oh, hey, how do I pay you? Oh, you're in another part of the world. How am I going to pay you? Hey, we'll just go to what's your Twitter profile? And you'll see their Twitter profile. You'll click on their the wallet link in the top of their profile, and you'll send them payments. Why isn't that going to happen? How on earth will PayPal be able to compete? Or apps? How will apps be able? This is, by the way, Zuckerberg wanted to get in this game with his whole Diem coin and got shot down because people fundamentally don't trust it, and they got carpet pulled writ large. That doesn't seem... Twitter's taking a very different approach. They're not trying to create their own coin, first of all. I think that was Facebook's... fell victim of their own unrestrained greed is what really did them in that case. Twitter, thank God, isn't trying to do a Twitter coin. And, in fact, they're really taking the opposite approach. They're going to let people use whatever kind of coins or payment systems they want, even PayPal. You'll see that in my Twitter profile. You click on my wallet, and you can send me money via PayPal if I have enabled that as one of the options, which I have. So I love the way that they're approaching it, and it's going to be very hard for people to compete with once people get in the habit of using this as a payment system, as a social network bank of sorts. And oh my goodness, if it turns out that Square is the digital wallets that we all are going to get tied into our Twitter accounts, Square is going to be in a really interesting position to be the bank accounts for all of the social media creatives and everything they're doing. And wild. It gets very, very interesting very quickly, especially when you consider that Twitter profiles are about to be able to also create social audio spaces. Many of us do that already. People can charge for those social audio spaces to enter those spaces. So now it's a platform for e-learning or any kind of, all of those Udemy's, all that kind of stuff, paying for information, or it's almost like having to pay for a telephone call. Sure. Oh, you want some of my time I have something of value. My information is of value to you. Okay, great. Yeah, I'll go ahead and create a private Twitter space, and there'll be a ticket available, and you can pay it and jump in. Yeah, when do you want to do that? Tomorrow? You want to do that right now? Great. I'll make a room right now. I'll make the ticket price for $100. You can hop in it right now. That's a whole lot of how the economy is developing. Is there's people who have information, and they need a very simple, fluid, immediate way to sell that information or product or service. And Twitter's on the brink of about to enable that in a way that no one else has been able to crack. I have to imagine Elon, and the point is that crypto will be one of the options of that payment, and that has to have Elon kind of interested in a way that his that I think that's a lot of what people are missing. I understand people are talking about the because Elon publicly is talking about the freedom of speech issues, and people are focused on that. But I think it's a little bit of a head
Hey,
fake.
Tyler, can I bring up
Wow,
something?
that's really amazing, Tyler. I mean, that's, connecting the dots in that way. I think it would be both, though. I have a friend, clubhouse friend, who um, a year ago at the Bitcoin conference, he had a dinner, and Jack Dorsey showed up, and people at the dinner were kind of roasting him a little bit about the whole Trump thing and the freedom of speech thing. And he said, look, on my board, I have a lot of very liberal progressives. I don't have control of Twitter. I don't have control of my board. I have 100% control over Square, now Cube. And he said that his his long-term goal was to make Twitter a decentralized social media platform,
Right.
and that he's working on it and blah, blah, blah. But, I wonder if that's also something that will come into play, a decentralized socialized social media platform, along with the money that you were just describing. It'll be interesting to watch.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. And then I want to hear what Ken's got to say. A little bit, kind of secretly behind the scenes. He hasn't really been that vocal about it, but I happen to know for a fact that he's incredibly interested in the issue of identities and payments, just like our friend Nicholas is. And for those who want the evidence of that, we can DM or whatever. But I have very strong evidence for that. So go ahead, Ken.
Yeah. So I wanted to point this out, and I don't necessarily have an answer how all this will play out. And it's what I'm going to point out is you could argue it's uniquely American, but I'm sure other countries have very similar issues. But I'm going to give you what's going on in the United States on it this year, and it hasn't gotten a tremendous amount of publicity in the mainstream press, but but it's gotten some. There are new requirements now for the traditional payment companies like a PayPal or Vimo. Is that how you pronounce it? Vimo, Zelle or things like that, about issuing 1099s for smaller transactions where formerly they didn't. And in some of those cases, the people probably should be paying taxes anyway. Some cases, perhaps not, if you're just sending money to family members, whatever. And it was very controversial, and no one knows how this is actually going to get implemented and what kind of problems it's going to cause, because people may now get two 1099s for the same transaction. You'll get a 1099 from the person that sent you the money, who actually was going to issue their own 1099. Now you'll get another 1099 from of the PayPal or Vimo or whatever. And so now if you do it with a digital currency, it gets even more complicated from a tax perspective, because if you're talking about real crypto like a Bitcoin or ETH or whatever, they fluctuate in value a lot, much more than a typical fiat. So if you bought Bitcoin when it was 15,000 and now it's 40 something thousand, and you take that Bitcoin now and you use it for a payment for whatever, for a sweater, whatever you want to buy on Twitter or whatever, you've created a taxable event. You now created a capital gain, okay, between the 15,000, in valuation or the fraction thereof for the sweater and the 40 something thousand dollar valuation. Okay, and now you're going to have and now if you have this 1099 requirement on payments, how is all of that going to work? Because it's going to get reported. And do you want to pay a capital gains tax? Because you were paying in fiat, you were paying in U.S. currency, even if it's devalued U.S. currency because of inflation. You're not going to have to pay capital gains on the currency that you're transferring to buy your sweater. So it's gonna have a lot of complications, I think, before it can get to the point you could do that on a massive scale that's traceable, that the IRS is requiring 1099s for, and using it for basic goods and services. I just wanted to point that out.
Alrighty, thank you, Ken. Anybody else? We'll go to the next story, I guess. Number 2 is. Well, let me hold on a second.
Can I just say very quickly, if I
Yep.
can? Okay. So is anybody worried that maybe this is like a how if you have, gazillion amount of money that you really take everything into monopoly, really? I'm just thinking that, if this allows him not what you mentioned earlier, for example, in terms of even getting into agreement with Trump and other things. So when one person has that type of power to actually make a huge difference in whichever way he wants to, we'll forget about, um, freedom of speech and things like that. But having the money, it doesn't matter if it's right or not for society, if it's good or bad. But having that type of monopolizing power, does it like, I mean, for me, what comes to mind is when the Wall Street had so much power and they became the biggest part of the economy, and instead of being, catalyzed to help grow businesses, all of a sudden they was holding the financial, the entire economy hostage. Even when they had the 2008 crash, they got bailed out when nobody else did in the subprime mortgage crisis. So I'm just wondering from that perspective what everybody thinks in terms of having that type of huge monopoly, and also that much power resting on one person, like you said, who can move markets, and even he can use the pump and dump thing that he was doing earlier with the Dogecoin. um, I'm looking at it from that perspective, and I'm just wondering what everybody else think from that point of view.
Didn't he open source his patents for Tesla?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of interesting thoughts as well. I mean, you know, Tesla has used its data. When journalists write fictitious or creative prose about creative writings, their musings, there's been journalists who intentionally tried to write hit pieces about Tesla. Tesla then looks at the data and says, "Well, according to the data, that's not at all what happened. Your narrative crafting against is very contrary to the facts and the data." That is kind of classic Elon, and it's kind of brilliant. So my point is, if somebody wants to create a conspiracy theory, a good conspiracy theory to create perhaps, is that Elon might have an interest in some of the Twitter data that he would then use in a more commercial way to be kind of self-beneficial from a Tesla, SpaceX perspective. DMs, etc. If somebody really wanted to get fancy with some conspiracy theories, I think they would want to go in that direction. But as I said, I think the genuine interest is the Twitter's products and service announcements roadmap is around adding a financial layer to Twitter in the form of digital wallets for digital the buying and selling of digital products and services in your profiles. That's all in the very next few months in the roadmap, and that has to be of tremendous interest to Elon, as somebody who built a company called PayPal that was primarily focused on enabling exactly that. So, yeah, stay tuned.
Yeah, Tyler, can I just to Messi's point there about power and people? I just have this perspective. Like, yeah, obviously we don't we want we need cultures where people speak truth to power and the power doesn't corrupt in some senses and it always does an influence, etc. But when I look at what Elon has done, he's bought a company with his money. Okay, his money he has earned by building like the most amazing company that has disrupted the entire motor industry, right? Having just opened it, a factory, a plant in the heart of the combustion engine land, as you would call it, right? Like the right at the heart. And so all of this is like based on. So if we take the extrapolation of that and we kind of say, okay, well, we should restrict him because he's becoming more powerful. That's the whole debate in the US. Like, why? Where do we restrict excellence and performance and outcome? Now, obviously, there's people going to say, "Oh, well, he got outcome because he got money from the government, et cetera, et cetera." But so could have somebody else. Somebody else could have got a subsidy at the right time. I remember when he got into Vantage Point and got the funding for that. He had the subsidies then, but he was absolutely adamant he was going to pay them back, right? And so, what I'm just curious about is when we kind of look at this and we do worry, and some people do, like I don't in that sense, because there's obviously some level of, oh, the most powerful person just became more powerful, I'm really worried. But intent matters, motivation matters, character matters. Well, let's see, right? And obviously there are specific things that matter, which I think, Tali, you have a very unique point of view on that, which I think is, it's not, some people have been talking about Web3 generally or some things like that, but your point of view on payments is very strong and how we could use this platform. But I'm so Messi, I don't know. I don't know how to think about it. It's a really good question you asked, though.
Yeah, I think that, you know, intelligence is one thing, having the, acumen to accumulate incredible wealth is another thing. But the third factor that has to be considered is a person's philosophy. And, whether they believe in centralization versus decentralization. I mean, centralization is all about force, and decentralization, is the opposite. And so, I think that part of the answer to what you bring up, Kyle, is whether he's going down a road where things get more centralized or decentralized. And I think that somewhere in there is the answer to that question.
One other, tiny, a little contextual detail that I might be uniquely positioned to comment on, having been in board meetings with Elon Musk, as he was on the board of Mahalo, and he is a very strong personality in a board meeting. He's sort of, how do I say, adamant when decisions are being decided, and he has a unique approach to making decisions based on in a very like somebody like a physicist approach, like a scientist's approach, based on equations, essentially very very incredibly complex equations with lots of variables. But when he does the calculation and he comes to what he thinks is the answer, he's quite adamant and persistent about having done that calculation that others aren't really able to do, and because they don't have quite the same scientific approach to it. And generally, he can be very persuasive, not in a emotional way, but in a scientific way in a board and in a board meeting context. And I think that will be interesting to see how Twitter deals with that. and I imagine it'll be rather positive net for Twitter to have that sort of perspective.
I don't know. Twitter has more than just data to it. It has a lot of human attributes.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I can see of Elon Musk from a distance, um, what he is missing is human. He's missing the social skills that social media should demand. Now, I don't know to what extent he's going to be. I'm worried specifically about the woman issue on Twitter. He doesn't have the best reputation for treating women well, and I'm just wondering whether in an era where women have as much power as we now do, um, that he's going to get himself into trouble by not creating, without limiting free speech. How do you do content moderation? I heard Neil yesterday on CNBC saying content moderation doesn't scale, and that's going to be the biggest problem that he has, that Elon implementing his vision for Twitter is how do you create a safe space for women and other marginalized people, um, without getting in the way of a very strong Section 230 and a very strong emphasis on freedom of speech.
If I can say 2 points. The first point, I think the first question before was not about if Elon Musk has so much power. I think I agree on that. I'm not scared of Elon Musk having so much power at all. Yeah, I think it's rather beneficial, but if crazy people or like people that want the worst for humanity could in theory get so much power, and it's not like intelligent people are automatically good people. Again, we saw that Nazis were, most of them were very smart and and made great achievements in science and stuff, but were horrible people. And if we need to somehow put rules in place that that hinder people from getting so much power in general, not like for Elon Musk. And then the other thing is, when I heard about this, when he had the interview, I'm not sure if it was Lex Friedman or the other guy. Um, he said he, especially on Mars, to have a more direct democracy where people vote directly, and he has been talking about the Twitter is basically a public space. I kind of I don't know why, but it kind of made me think that he maybe wants to guide society or global society for without borders in that direction by making that move, because he usually has like big ideas in mind and just I know payment system is a big deal for it, but usually he has like big ideas in mind and make small steps towards them.
Okay, so the next big story is about Axie Infinity managers who loan in-game NFTs to other players in exchange for a cut of any profits and depend on a constant influx of new players. So from the sound of it, it sounds like Vice is doing a bit of a hit job on Axie Infinity. That
It
manager,
sounds like the Ponzi scheme says
Ponzi
the scam
scheme.
guy.
Yeah, I've heard it referred to as a Ponzi scheme before.
well, they're going after the managers in this play-to-earn game. Axie Infinity employ large teams of quote-unquote scholars who can't afford their own NFTs even as the game's economy spirals. Then Bloomberg writes a piece about Axie Infinity DAOs have fallen 45% from a November peak. to 1.48 million of the week ending a day before Ronin, whatever that. I mean, the whole all the whole entire NFT space has peaked in November. I don't Axie Infinity is just one piece in that big puzzle. The next is from The Intercept. It says internal Amazon documents show that Amazon planned their upcoming internal messaging app. Gee, I wonder if that'll get abused. And this new Amazon internal messaging app would block union-related words, including the word union or grievance or pay raise. I wonder why. Why would they block those words in particular? But Amazon will block and flag employee posts on a planned internal messaging app that contain keywords. Well, the first thought is, I think that's kind of genius on Amazon's part to realize, why should we use Slack or some third-party platform that we don't control, ultimately, and potentially can have leaks on, right? That makes all the sense in the whole goddamn world, that Amazon would want to entirely own their platform that their employees are talking on. That's genius. There's no two ways around that. But the banning of words or blacklisting of words, I think anyone can do. Any admin can do that on Slack already. Could they not? So whatever platform Amazon was already using, because they must have some kind of system for internal communications, that they were probably already have a list of ban words anyway. So I imagine we're going to see a lot more companies waking up to realize they should not be using third-party systems for their internal communications.
So
Uh,
the way around those things, by the way, and eventually, I guess you'll tell me AI will get even smarter about it. But I have seen people for various rooms, even on internet chat rooms, and for different reasons. Quite frankly, a lot of advantage. Casino players, people who count cards, used to have in the early days of the internet. They had these Usenet groups, and they're always worried about the casinos are going to spy on them. So anytime they wanted to talk about something, they would take a word, strip out some of the letters, and put like an asterisk in, where the letters were, so that the word couldn't get picked up, quickly by software, but people could kind of interpret what the word was supposed to be. Kind of like when you use an expletive, and you put those little stars or asterisks to replace some of the letters. So, I mean that's what I would suspect will happen initially in Amazon. So the word bathroom just won't be spelled out or something. They'll leave out a couple of letters, but you'll figure it out.
yeah. So this article is quite interesting. I'm going to share it at the top of the Clubhouse room. Oh, I thank you to Cheryl who already did. It says, basically, it's a leaked document. This new Amazon worker chat app would ban words like union, restrooms, pay raise, and plantation. Also, words like grievance, slave labor, this is dumb as a phrase, living wage, diversity, vaccine, and others. Amazon will block and flag employee posts of a planned internal messaging app that contain keywords pertaining to unions, etc. Also, prison is another banned word. Quote, our teams are always thinking about new ways to help employees engage with each other, said Amazon spokesperson. This particular program has not been approved yet and may change significantly or even never launch at all. Okay. So, well, there's, I guess, no point in doing a whole lot of hand-wringing about an app that may never see the light of day.
Yeah, but Tyler, the other interesting thing is once you have a union, I mean, they only have one union now, right? But if they end up with more unions, the part of the union negotiation will be like the freedom to communicate, and use words like that. They'll probably try to insist that gets written into the union contract, so they get to talk about whatever they want to talk about, and they'll probably get supported by the National Labor Relations Board on that. So, I mean, that's one of the issues once you have a union. You know,
Mm-hmm.
Every company, this is Robert, every company gets the union they deserve. Every company gets the union they deserve. So if they're trying to ban words, I mean, the public, whoever they have working with them, will just come up with, a whole different set of words, you know. So they're junior at some of this stuff. So it'll be very interesting to see how this plays out. But for them to have gotten a union, and of all places in New York City, uh, it tells the tale because they struggled in Alabama. Isn't Alabama supposed to be up for another vote? So we'll see how that goes now too.
A pilot program is slated to launch later this month. In addition to slurs and swear words, the planned list includes the following. If it does launch at some point down the road, an Amazon spokesperson said there's no plans for many of the words you're calling out to be screened. The only kinds of words that may be screened are ones that are offensive or harassing, which is intended to protect our team. Okay. So, the next big article, give me 1 second here. Here we go. Is from Microsoft announces a preview of an ARM-based chips for Azure virtual machines. That's pretty geeky. The next is that Amazon's Project Kuiper. I don't know how to pronounce this word. It's their version of Starlink, essentially. Their satellite internet network. They've booked 83 satellite launches over 5 years to deploy most of its 3,236 satellites, which will beam internet to Earth. The subsidiary is partnering with Blue Origin and ULA and Arianespace. So they're going to start making launches to get their satellites. 83 launches for over 3,000 satellites. So they can have their own satellite internet. The next is German police shut down a darknet market called Hydra Market, which had about just over €1 billion in revenue in 2020. And Bloomberg's reporting it says around 95% or $18 billion of the total trading volume on NFT marketplace called LooksRare are users selling tokens to earn rewards, not genuine NFT trades. The next one is about a crypto investment firm called Paradigm, says it has $13 billion under management, which is up 343% from December 2020. Andreessen Horowitz has 54 billion, Sequoia has 85, Tiger Global has 124. So they're just looking at all the big crypto, the VCs who are investing in crypto and their total amounts that they manage. The next is, in a filing, Block, formerly known as Square, is contacting 8.2 million Cash App customers in the U.S. after a breach caused by a former employee 4 months ago exposed some of their account info. Block has confirmed a data breach involving a former employee who downloaded reports from Cash App that contains some U.S. customer information. The next one is a look at one of a Reddit community that's getting a lot of attention in the past 24 hours called Place, which lets users build collective art by posting a colored pixel every 5 minutes. And yeah, it's the hot new thing over the weekend. The next one is a new app called AppWrite, which is an open source backend as a service startup. Just raised $27 million by Tiger Global. And a company called HiveMapper, which wants to build decentralized digital mapping network on Solana, raises $18 million. FTX exchange makes a significant investment in a stock exchange called IEX. A company called Remote, which is an HR service that helps companies hire and manage remote employees across 60 or more countries, raises $300 million at a $3 billion valuation. And an Israeli-based company called Coro is building an all-in-one cybersecurity service for mid-market companies, raised to $60 million. Tons of other fundraising announcements as usual. And Activision Blizzard is back in the news. They will let individual studios make the final call on a vaccine mandate for returning to the office after some employees protested the lifting of the vaccine mandate. And a former ByteDance employee, that's the parent company of TikTok, by the way. So a former employee says the company scrapped Instagram and Snapchat and others to make, or scraped. They scraped Instagram and Snapchat and others to make a fake account on TikTok predecessor. Interesting. Sequoia names veteran investor and PayPal alumni Roloff Botha as senior steward effective January 5th. He will be replacing Doug Leone, who will remain as a GP of existing funds. And you might remember that name because I gave a bit of a rant hype for Roloff about a month ago, who was also on the board of Mahalo along with Elon Musk, and the two of them have quite a long history together as two South Africans who were both at PayPal. You can imagine they know each other very, very well. Roloff was the CFO at PayPal when Elon was the CEO. What I was saying, those who were in the room will remember, and were perhaps surprised to hear, that you would assume if you have Elon Musk on your board, you would assume that the entire room would kind of shut up and listen when Elon speaks, and kind of good luck, competing with Elon for the microphone in a board meeting. And what I revealed was that I believe the real superstar of the board meetings was Roloff Botha, whose beautiful photo is pinned to the top of the room now. Thank you, Cheryl. And Roloff is at Sequoia. Roloff is totally brilliant, absolutely stunningly brilliant, especially in a board meeting context. Always the first to arrive, even when he's the only one that flew in for the meeting. Always the last to leave. And when the meeting's over, he says, let's go get, a late lunch, an early dinner. Let's keep it going. He's just incredible. What an incredible investor and brilliant mind. And my own personal opinion was Roloff was if you had to give out MVP awards at the end of every board meeting, I probably would have given most meetings to Roloff, even though Elon was on the board. So Roloff is just a superstar, and I think any startup that would have him as an investor and is blessed to have, the ones that are like Square, by the way, like Block, who he's on the board of Block as well. But I think everybody who has a Roloff would agree that he's just uniquely incredible as an investor in the company. And I think it's a smart choice to have him now running Sequoia globally, now that Doug's kind of stepping down from that role. Okay, so MailChimp discloses a breach where hackers accessed 319 accounts and stole audience data from 102 clients. Okay. And that's the end of the big...
They were actually targeting crypto people. Yeah, that was the game for the MailChimp. They were actually targeting crypto to get hold of their accounts.
Makes sense. That's where the money is. Okay, yeah, there's just people are going crazy to get into crypto wallets. So be careful if you have one. There's an incredible amount of hijinks afoot to try and get into people's crypto wallets. I think it's because a lot of early users are still a little confused as to how they work, and they can be taken advantage of. So, shall we go into the tweets? Before we do, did anyone find a tweet that they want to make sure that we cover today?
No, but you gave a tip about a Ukrainian journalist last week, and he is really extraordinary. Today he's at the site where they had this, I would call it war crime massacre, and he is really he is quality in both his texts, and the horrid pictures he puts up is yeah,
Yeah, I'll pin.
holy crap.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Johan. Yeah, it was for those who were in the room last week. I did something I rarely do, which is suggested somebody worth following on Twitter, because I on Twitter currently follow. Let's see, how many people do I follow on Twitter? 300 or so, 400. So when I recommend to follow somebody, I'm incredibly choosy with who I follow on Twitter, and this is the best Twitter follow. If you're interested in what's happening in Ukraine, I'll be shocked if you can find somebody that's more on the ground than this person who's literally on the front lines every day with a camera, with making videos and photos and really brilliant comments. A very intelligent individual about what's going on, and it really highlights the power of Twitter as a platform. My God, I mean, he's what you wish every journalist was able to do. Let me go ahead and pin one of his most recent tweets to the top of the room here. And the tweet I just pinned was from 8 hours ago. He says, Ukraine's 503rd Marine Battalion officially denies the Russian allegations, saying its Marines have surrendered en masse to Russia in Mariupol. And that's incredibly important, what he's tweeting right there. And that word needs to get out, because Russia's trying to do a propaganda misinformation campaign and try and convince everybody that this battalion of Ukrainians inside of Mariupol have surrendered to the Russians. And he's here to say, nope, that's bullshit. And he goes, that video could be showing a mixture, and he goes on to add context about how and why it's bullshit. And all day long, he tweets, a dozen times a day, if not more. And there's any one of his tweets is very, very valuable. It's just invaluable content he's making, and it really makes me want to. He should be making millions of dollars off of this content he's making on his Twitter account. He's providing much more value with regard to what's going on in Ukraine than all other news networks combined. All of them. All of them combined. And he's providing way, way more ground truth of what's actually going on hour by hour, day by day on the ground. It's incredibly valuable what he's doing. And what I would love to see is a way for his content to be instantly licensable by the news channels who want to share it, so that he can himself monetize that in a semi-automated way. Through NFTs, ostensibly, could be one means of doing that, for tracking and handling the remuneration vehicle and everything else. So we'll see. Anyway, I just pinned it to the top of the room if you're interested in what's going on minute by minute on the ground. I challenge you to find a better source. So thank you, Johan, for that one. There's been a whole bunch of people sharing a whole bunch of tweets. Again, I want to see, because we might not get to all of them. For sure, we won't get to all of them. So I want to make sure to give anyone an open mic to jump in if there was one that they were particularly fond of, as Ken usually is. He had find some great ones.
Well, I sent you that one yesterday. I just don't know if you want to even touch on it, because it's okay. Because as I said, it happens to involve a technology company, but it could have just as easily been a fast food company. But there was a big article. I mean, I tweeted it out. Hopefully, I can't both talk and pin and clip all these things together, but it was tweeted out yesterday, so maybe Cheryl can help here. It involves a company called, if I pronounce it right, Palantir Systems. Well, it involves their stock. It really doesn't involve their company. What happened is, I guess one of their early investors, I'm assuming that they were an early investor given who the company was, when Palantir went public, they went public through something called a direct listing rather than an IPO. And so the stock's been trading for about 2 years. And at some point, this company had like $300 million worth of stock of this company, and they wanted to sell it in like one big, what we call a block trade on Wall Street. And they went to Morgan Stanley to assist with that. And apparently now there are accusations from the this money management company that Morgan Stanley front ran the order. That basically either they sold, shorted the stock for their own account before doing the transaction on their behalf, or they couldn't keep their mouth shut and told some other clients that this was going to happen. That's the accusation. It may not be true because I can tell you block trading is, a complicated area. But the guy at Morgan Stanley who was in charge of this, who was a very senior guy on that block equity trading thing, and apparently the story came out like last year, but it was updated yesterday. I actually missed it a year ago. They've put this guy on leave he's been on leave for a long time. So, and apparently the regulators are in there looking at every email. A lot of the trading desks have all the phone calls recorded and stuff. So it's quite a big deal. So it's just a tech story because it involves a technology company. It's more of a Wall Street story about how to handle block trades, because literally it could have been a company in any other industry. So that was my tweet from yesterday, if that's what we're talking about.
Okay.
A reflection. Palantir is specialized in surveillance and working with. Yeah, Palantir is probably hired by all our governments to do surveillance of possible spies and all things. So if Palantir says that we have sources that says that something have happened,
No,
they
no, no, no,
probably
no, no,
have
no, no. It had
very
nothing to do
accurate
with that. No,
sources.
no, it didn't. I shouldn't. That's why I said it could have been a fast food company. It literally just happened to involve their stock. Okay,
Okay, okay,
it
yeah,
it, it, it could have been Burger King, really. Okay,
yeah, because Palantir is the
I know who
most
they are. Yeah, I
prominent
know who they
surveil.
are.
Yeah,
But
there.
it
Yeah,
doesn't
sorry.
involve them at all. It doesn't involve them
Okay,
at all. Yeah.
sorry.
Okay. The first tweet I have here is from Katerina that DNA nanotechnology could speed up pharmaceuticals. More than 40,000 molecules can be synthesized and analyzed within an area smaller than a pinhead. A new tool speeds up development of vaccines and other pharmaceutical products by more than 1,000,000 times while minimizing costs. Okay. And also from Katerina, that widely used food additives affect the human gut microbiota. Have you heard about the food additive E415? It is also known as xanthan gum. Most likely you eat it several times a week. Xanthan gum is used in everyday products, and it has an impact on your gut biome. And if you follow us regularly, you know just how many new interesting things are being learned about our guts and the bacteria there within, and how much of an influence they have on all kinds of things. So it says, we're surprised at how much the human gut bacteria have adapted to this additive since it was introduced into the modern diet only 50 years ago. When it was first introduced, xanthan gum was thought to not affect us as it was not digested by the human body. However, a new study shows that the additive nevertheless affects the bacteria that live in our intestine, and these bacteria are important for our health and well-being. Quote, the gut bacteria we have investigated show genetic changes and a rapid adaptation to enable them to digest this particular additive.
Hey, Tyler, if people don't know, xanthan gum is used a lot in gluten-free stuff like gluten-free pastas and breads as a binder. So if people are gluten-free, those are probably bigger consumers of xanthan gum, but that's a big area where it's found.
I wonder if that's a driver for the uptick in colitis and irritable bowel syndromes that we're seeing also in our populations.
All kinds of autoimmune diseases are aggravated by um, various disorders of the microbiome. So uh, it's this is potentially a significant issue.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I think all the years that I've been studying like molecular dynamics that, oh, whenever you hear hippies tell you about grain fed, free range, whatever topics of specialty foods, that the lack of research in these specific additives and these assumptions, almost dogma like beliefs, weren't being tested. Now that we have these kind of studies and they can actually investigate whether these claims are true, you realize how much perhaps we take for granted sometimes that certain of our assumptions about our foods are true. So definitely something to be really careful about, and especially with Tyler always talking about food security and the scarcity of getting really good nutrition. I think it just goes to show that perhaps industrialization isn't all that it's propped up to be.
When
Okay.
the organic movement was driven by pesticides and toxins in non-organically grown food, but it may end up that the bigger impact is around what one of the pioneers in the field calls farming your microbiome by what you eat, and it may be the bigger factor.
Okay. Next one is from Pat, that from Wall Street Journal, that General Motors and Honda plan to co-develop affordable EVs. The first of the vehicles, which likely would be priced below $30,000 in the US, won't be ready until 2027. You'll have to wait for that. The next is from Bibi from Nikkei Japan, that Singapore's crypto community face added scrutiny under a new law. Companies that provide overseas digital currency services must obtain licenses now in Singapore. Hardly a surprise if you know anything about Singapore. They're very fond of controlling things over there. The next is from BB from TechCrunch about the NSO Group, the makers of Pegasus. They say that NSO hacked new Pegasus victims weeks after Apple sought an injunction in Jordan. Jordanian journalists, lawyers, and human rights defenders were targeted with spyware, according to the headline. That's a kind of unfortunate tone to it, in that let's read the article here. It says investigators say they found evidence that a Jordanian journalist and human rights defender's iPhone was hacked with Pegasus spyware just weeks after Apple sued the spyware maker's NSO Group to stop it from targeting Apple's customers. Award-winning journalist Suhair Jaradat's phone was hacked with the notorious spyware as recently as December 5th, 2021. According to an analysis of her phone, which was shared by TechCrunch, she was sent a WhatsApp message from someone impersonating a popular anti-government critic with links to Pegasus spyware compromising her phone. According to forensic analysis, her phone was hacked several times in the preceding months, as far back as February 2021. Apple had filed a lawsuit against Israeli spyware maker NSO Group in November 2021, seeking a court-issued injunction aiming at banning NSO from using Apple's products and services to develop and deploy hacks against its customers. The injunction would, if granted, make it more difficult for NSO to deploy its spyware, since its stealthiest capabilities rely on abusing Apple's own services, such as iMessage, to create Apple user accounts for delivering the malware. Pegasus gives its government customers near complete access to the devices, and Apple declined to comment on the record when reached about the new report prior to publication. And the Jaradat is one of several Jordanians, including human rights defenders, lawyers, and fellow journalists, whose phones were compromised, likely by agencies of the Jordanian government, according to Frontline Defenders and Citizen Lab's finding on Tuesday.
I think making open standards like they want to do in Europe might actually help address these kind of issues, because each of these messaging platforms kind of, a lot going on behind the curtain. But if you standardize, then it also makes it much more accessible for researchers to make some leeway in addressing some of these holes. So leave it to Europe to fix something like this. I think it might be a good way.
Okay, the dark Lord is here and talking again. Yesterday, I pulled a joke on you when we discussed some malware that were implemented on an Android app that were in the background. I said it's just like Microsoft Outlook. You should be aware that the Microsoft Outlook client on the Apple devices has been the bridge in for Pegasus and a couple of the other ones for it's 2 years now, and there's still no patch for it. So I pulled that joke, but it is a dark truth behind it, Johan.
See, that's where I was leading because this isn't Pegasus's first go around in these sort of things. I've not seen any oversight, any ownership. I just don't understand how they're able to operate in this way. This isn't the first political person to sort of suffer being hacked by a Pegasus software, and they've not spoken to it then. They've not done it now. I think that's far irresponsible of them.
Okay, the next is from BB from NPR. A Russian oligarch's $90 million yacht has been seized as part of U.S. sanctions. Spanish officials have seized a Russian-owned luxury yacht in Mallorca at the request of the U.S. Department of Justice.
All aboard!
Tyler, the FBI were there as well.
Okay. Popping champagne bottles and caviar dreams on board their new loot, their new bounty. What the question is, what's going to happen to these insanely large vessels that require incredible upkeep?
And it requires huge amount of money to maintain the daily uh, storage there. So it's a hot potato in each one's hands because it's a Spanish official owned, and the land is a Russia. But actually, it's owned by Russia oligarch, but it's now still stayed in France. So everyone is trying to figure out how to fix this problem.
What's going to be interesting is when it's done, how much it actually costs the different countries to maintain these boats. When if they really were going to take them, it'd be cheaper for them either to sell them or sink them. But they're going to end up spending tens of millions of dollars managing these things, and people are going to be like, "What?" Because we're going to give them right back to the oligarchs in the end.
Well, we can't
And you would have
auction them off
saved the
like
oligarch the
we.
salaries of all those people for all that time.
And the overhead costs.
Hold on, Francine,
Well,
you were
that's
saying?
an interesting. I was going to say we can't auction them off. Like mostly when the government confiscates property in a criminal forfeiture or a civil forfeiture or whatever, they auction it off after a certain period of time. But I doubt that
Yeah,
they can do this because they might have to give them back, right?
Yeah,
I have another
spot on, Dr.
suggestion. Use them
Francine.
to clear the mines of the Black Sea. Use them to clear the mines. Fill them with iron, send them in, and let them blow up one by one.
And
yeah, that's
Dr.
actually
Francine, in some states, they actually, or some places, I'm talking to U.S. right now, you don't even have to get the full conviction before they put these things up on auction. So you would think that if we really were tough on these oligarchs, they would have put them up on auction real fast. But knowing the government, will move slow, and it'll end up costing more than what really was planned.
new Russian oligarch yacht now features all of this spyware and secret microphones from the Russian intelligence agencies. Order here now. So I think that's also a big problem that the Russians are notorious for bugging all of their equipment, their embassies, and all that stuff. So and it may actually be most economical to just sink them, which is an unfortunate waste of so much money. Such a beautiful piece of technology just to be thrown away, but 'tis the way of our world.
Okay. On to the next one here. Dr. Fran has one that Fortnite maker Epic Games raises $144 million for Ukraine aid.
Hell yeah.
BB has one that Ukraine says Russian atrocities in another town might be worse than in Bucha. That the atrocities in Borodyanka, another town near Kyiv, are likely worse than in Bucha, with officials said 300 civilians were killed in Bucha, and Zelensky said the death toll in other cities may be higher. And there is, as I said, satellite images from 2 weeks ago of streets filled with civilian bodies. So Russia's claims are going to be hard to defend, that they didn't commit these atrocities.
Tyler, does anyone know what happened at the UN? Because I know they were speaking today or yesterday.
I don't. I don't know the answer to that one. The next one's from Pat about a UK startup called First Light Fusion successfully combines atomic nuclei as it targets net energy gain and achieves projectile fusion breakthrough. And let's pray to God that's true. And that's your, again, it seems every week there's a headline about fusion making gains. We should get all of these projects together in one place. They need a fusion gathering somewhere to compare notes.
Some sort of fusion of minds.
Fusion. It's called Fusion Fusion Squared.
That's actually a great brand name.
So if you want to sponsor that event, go ahead and ping me. I'll go ahead and arrange that event. I would love to go to that event.
Where would we have that event, Tyler? Where would we hold that event? Which city?
It
Mm,
could happen in Oxford, Tyler, because
yeah,
Carl is
Yes,
there, but also Carl is there, but
that's
also
the Cullum.
Oxford
That's where the
just
Cullum
published
Center is.
a paper
That's where
on
the
fusion, with the universities just released on. I just saw briefly on LinkedIn.
yeah. Cal, if you know any companies that have any
it's a
budgets,
good place to have it actually, Tyler,
yeah,
because
I'm sure Oxford will provide a venue. Yeah.
yeah, because the column, which to Professor Asid's point, there's a lot of research here, but also that big breakthrough that recently we talked about. You remember where they actually had X seconds of it actually
Yes.
generated net positive. That's at the Cullum Center, right? In
Uh-huh.
fact, my daughter interned there for a brief period before she went to university, and it's very local here. There's a big community here. Material science is huge here. There's big material science breakthroughs happening. That's making fusion happen, by the way. So yeah, interesting. Fusion Squared in Oxford.
And happy to connect if anyone wants to with the Oxford Business Development because they are talking to us. And so if you want to do something, I can link you with the lady who's in charge of Oxford Business Development.
Tyler, when it comes to fusion retiming, you might just want to look up the difference between scientific break even and engineering break even.
Okay.
FYI, so they're close to. They have little tiny moments of scientific break even. They're nowhere near engineering break even, and you need an engineering break even to be economically viable. So just check out the difference sometime in terms of timing and when this thing is really going to take off.
Okay.
Yeah, but the scientific showed that the engineering was possible. I think that's why it was so exciting, because the proof of concept kind of paves the way for, okay, well, now funders, investors, governments are more likely to put in that much more money, because I think up until now it's been kind of a pipe dream. So
It's an awesome technology and it's going to come. It's just the timing's still a little uncertain. Yeah.
That must be tripled. So
Resource Acer project. Please, everybody check it out. Sorry.
okay, the several people sharing or Poppy shared from the Guardian that the IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, has their new report. And essentially the report says now or never if world is to stave off climate disaster. Greenhouse gas emissions must peak by 2025, say climate scientists in what is, in effect, their final warning. And I have to comment on a personal note that what's happening here in Thailand weather-wise is truly disturbing, and I will even it's the scariest thing. What's going on here at the moment is perhaps one of the scariest things I've ever had to endure, which is sounds trivial. Essentially, it's rain. The problem is where I happen to be in the Gulf of Thailand is we have a very consistent rain season based in November historically, which has then grown to delayed into December over the years. And in recent years, say 3 years ago, we even had a bit of it stretch into early January, which was very concerning, although not shocking. What we have in front of us this year is it seemingly really hasn't ended. It went from January into February into March, and it's now gone well into April. And I've asked some of the older Thai folks that I know who've lived here their entire lives, well into their 70s and 80s. They've never seen this before. The rain season going into February, March, and April. I imagine they hadn't, but they confirmed that we're in uncharted territories where the rain season seemingly now has no end, and I'm now forced to envision an endless rain season here near the equator, where it just pisses rain all the time. And the problem is that would instantly kill Thai tourism and have tremendous impacts on farming in a very negative way. And it's a very harrowing thought, but that looks like what's on the horizon at the moment.
And Tyler, I'm not sure if you noticed, but you see the typhoons in Asia. Actually, normally here in Taiwan we had like 3 or 4 at the least typhoons during the summer vacation, but right now, almost in the past 5 years, I can say, they went north. So that's why there are more and more typhoons hitting Japan directly and hitting China's like even Shanghai as well. And they don't have these mountains along their seashore. So in Taiwan, we have these central mountains that will consume a lot of energies of typhoons. But just like I said, China and Japan, they don't have this kind of mountains to protect them. So you see more and more disasters from this extreme climate change as well, just like what happened in Thailand as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Hey, so Tyler, I got two questions about the Thailand weather. Now that you brought it up, so I'm looking at an article that talks about some unusually cold weather by
Yeah.
something coming, but they said it got like down to maybe like 19 Celsius or something. But then
Yep.
I'm looking at the temperature now; it looks like it's more like 29 or
Yep.
30 degrees Celsius. So I mean, is that cold weather gone? Is that you know
Bangkok.
relative?
No, Bangkok had some cool nights lately. 19 in Thailand's cold. People put on jackets for 19, believe it or not. Thais are not used to the sensation of cold. So anything below 25 catches their attention. So, yeah, they're having cool evenings at the moment. Normally that happens in January. That's
And Thailand has many attitude. I think he may be talking about Chiang Mai.
It could, yeah. Chiang Mai can get down to even 10 degrees in certain points of the year, high up on the mountains. But generally, in the flatlands, if you're not up in the mountains, up in the north, and you're in the rest of Thailand, as 99% of people are, it's generally pretty much 27 to 31 all year round, a day and night. So it's been a bit cooler than normal, but that's partly due to like when you get a bunch of rain and heavy clouds, and the thick clouds kind of block out the sun day and night. The temperature goes down for sure. That's what's happening at the moment.
So is any of this what you just described thrown off your thesis that Thailand is a safer place to hide out from global climate
Oh,
change, or your
yes,
main
I was
concern was
waiting for that.
water, so you
yeah,
got water, so that's all you care about. Yeah.
correct. Yes and no, because to me the primary concern is the water displacement Some places are going to get drier, some places are going to get wetter, and somewhat extremely so, as we're seeing. And there was a headline in the past 24 hours that California is going to face the hardest droughts it's ever faced because it's had the lightest snowpack this year of any year. So here comes the rest of the year going into heavy droughts already. And that's a concern. Southern California is clearly on a pattern to be having less and less and less rain henceforward. In Southern
The
California,
pro-
yeah,
yeah, but the problem in Southern California, as you know, even when it has rained heavily, and there's been spots where we've gotten some. In fact, it just happened the other day because of climate change. We're not even getting the normal runoff from the snowpack because it's evaporating in the air too fast. So I
yeah,
mean, even when we get the snow and the rain, it's not helpful enough.
Yeah, but we do such here in California. We do such a horrible job with capture. I mean, you would have thought that we would have learned from Singapore by now on how to capture and retain it when we have it. But there's so much that just flows right back into the ocean.
yeah. But back to your question, that Thailand, as I studied, was going to be receiving more rain because the net amount of precipitation that falls on the planet is sort of static. It's being reallocated and condensed around the equator. To oversimplify, you can look at very detailed maps of who's going to have who's going to have less total precipitation and who's going to have more, and it's essentially the places that are going to have the lose the most are the Middle East is going to lose the most rain, and Southeast Asia is going to gain a lot. Central Africa is going to gain a lot. Places around the equator are going to gain a lot, and the Middle East is going to be, to me, the places that are going to get a lot of rain. I didn't really consider that they could have too much, that they couldn't grow things, but looking at the rain that we're getting lately, that thought's now entering my mind. That is, you could potentially have endless rain all the time, and then I wonder what kind of things you would grow in that environment. Because that's kind of what we're facing here in 2022. Like the rain is just rather relentless in 2022 here. So, but again, great problem to have. Rather than be on the other side of the water shortage side of things. Water shortage scares the bejesus out of me because that leads to mass migrations very in the near term, near midterm. So well, yeah, but I never actually was concerned about the amount of rain that I knew Thailand would get. As of now, I am starting to get concerned for two reasons. The tourism, I realize today, will quickly die if Thailand gets a reputation as always raining, and then it will be a potentially significant challenge for farmers to deal with in a way I had not anticipated.
Hey, Tyler, this is breaking news, and it's only maybe tangentially tech related because it talks about really the brilliant doctors in medicine and medical science we have in the United States. Tiger Woods says he's going to play in the Masters this weekend, most likely. And for those who don't know, greatest golfer probably in history was involved in an incredibly bad auto accident in Southern California, maybe no more than 2 years ago. Probably lucky he didn't lose a leg, and they had to rebuild basically his body. I mean, he has all sorts of plates in it and whatever. For him to be able to play golf at that level, just within maybe 2 years of an accident like that, nobody ever thought he'd ever play again after that accident, is absolutely incredible. So, but that he just announced that today he's likely to play in the Masters this weekend.
Okay, and then I have a couple more here.
That just speaks to if it's Tiger Woods, it's the $800 million man. So a little bit
Yeah,
more than what the TV show was.
So BB found this one from the South China Morning Post that Beijing assures Kyiv that China supports peace talks. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi speaks with Ukrainian counterpart for a second time since the Russian invasion, and assures Kyiv that China supports peace talks. Okay.
Yeah, Wang Yi met the diplomatic. What's the name of it? They from Russia. So this week they said they support the peace when they talk to Ukraine's listed. Who's this guy? Kuleba. Yeah. So you can see how they try to balance between the wars, but at the same time still. You can't tell what they're gonna do, but they benefit from this as well because Russian couldn't do had a harsh measure to China as well because we rely on the future the consuming of their energies as well. So yeah, we're seeing this kind of news that they won't condemn Russia, but at the same time they will support the peace talk for Ukraine. That's how they dealing with this issue right now.
Okay, the last tweet of the day, I believe it was Jason sent this one in, that U.S. warships was chased by two car-sized balls of light. The U.S. Navy warship was shadowed by two car-sized balls of light that were unaffected by anti-drone weapons, according to the U.S. Navy. The USS Kearsarge is the latest vessel to have reportedly had a UFO encounter as the U.S. military begins to open up about the mysterious phenomena. Documentary filmmaker Dave Beatty revealed the reported sighting from October 2021. At least two objects are said to have lurked near the 40,000-ton amphibious assault ship for several nights while it was on a training exercise off the east coast of the U.S. The phenomena, described by sources familiar with the encounter as odd and menacing balls of light, are said to have been following around half a mile behind the ship and around 200 feet above the ocean.
Wow, that is awesome.
Half
Thanks,
a
Tom DeLonge, for making all of this less taboo, but really, really concerning. We always like to think of ourselves as being all powerful on this planet, despite the fact that we can't even control our own climate or weather. But this, I think, should inspire people a little bit, but also the young scientists and other people. Perhaps this is cause for some inspiration so that maybe we can get back on the technological horse.
It says that Beatty was contacted by a now retired U.S. Marine officer identified only as Mark regarding the strange episode. The USS Kearsarge had been training at the time ahead of an overseas deployment, including with systems designed to take down enemy drones. Oh, well, that's handy. The weapons included anti-drone Ghostbusters-style backpacks and systems mounted on vehicles. Pictures from the ship's public Facebook page reveal they had these capabilities on board at the time of the alleged encounter. The objects are said to have been spotted at night by the deck watch, who could not gain a thermal targeting lock on them. It is understood the incident was recorded on video by the crew, but this footage has not yet been released. Marines on board are said to have believed at first the unexpected objects were part of a surprise training exercise for the new anti-drone weapons. However, they discovered the countermeasures did not disrupt the objects, which were doing swooping maneuvers as they followed the ship. Mark told Beatty that the USS Kearsarge radioed command about the objects and were informed the objects were, quote-unquote, not ours, meaning not from the U.S. military. The documentarian is attempting a deeper dive into the event, which is the latest UFO incident reported to have been encountered by the U.S. Navy. Beatty previously revealed deck logs that confirmed a UFO encounter by the USS Kidd when the destroyer was swarmed by at least 4 unexplained objects in July of 2019. And there has been a series of changes in recent years after the infamous trio of U.S. Navy UFO videos. The footage stunned the world and remains unexplained, and has sparked a new, more mainstream interest in UFOs.
So, am I to hear correctly that supposedly UFOs hovered around mariners and their first instinct was to attack, only to find that that attack was failed and they survived to tell the story. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
These are the most kindest aliens I've ever heard of.
It's
All
not
right.
aliens.
Nanobots.
Ben, what do you think it is?
Every you look at, there's a for if you know some science. So I haven't seen this one, but and I can't wait till the day it is aliens, and one day it will be, and that will be amazing. But until then, I go with Neil deGrasse Tyson. What we need somebody to do, says they've seen these things, is when they're on one of these alien spaceships having these sex experiments. You need to grab something, distract the alien, grab an ashtray, bring it back to Earth, or back to the lab, hand it to Neil deGrasse Tyson or somebody, to do some experiments on it, and anything that's traveled halfway across the galaxy is going to be super interesting to look at in a lab. In the meanwhile, some eyewitness testimony, which is the weakest form of testimony in science, is not a lot of use to anybody. And everything I've seen as an ex an amateur astronomer and so forth, is clearly explainable by simple local phenomena such as lens flares and camera artifacts and atmospheric phenomena and ball lightning and everything else. So I don't know particularly this one. I'd have to look at it. I just can't wait till the one day we do get one and it actually is something interesting. But in the meanwhile, people need to swat up on their basic artifacts a bit more, I think. So anyway,
So
But
do you
maybe
think?
we can teach Americans not to fire first. I think that's just in our DNA. So thank you.
I think that's an
Yeah, that would be a
interesting,
good takeaway.
but this is an interesting, unique characteristics of this particular sighting, which is they tried to shoot at it, which would give some indication that they were rather confident that it was there, and more
yeah,
than
And
something
also that
something
their
was.
technology supersedes ours. That's another point of concern.
Well, something was somewhere, but knowing where something is distance-wise at night is incredibly difficult. I mean, it's hard enough for our poor little human brains to perceive the size of the moon, right? The moon's low in the sky; it appears bigger to us. Why? I don't know if you guys know why, but if you look into it, it's because of our perception of the shape of the sky. We believe that the sky on the horizon and horizontally is much further away from us than the sky above our head. We see ourselves as being in like a bowl, but not a kind of semi-spherical bowl, but a kind of more classic dessert bowl shape. So to explain the size of the moon on our eyes when we see it low in the sky, our brain goes, "Wow! If it's going to occupy that much of my visual field, it must be really close." So it looks bigger and closer. It's nothing to so things like that. Now at night, if something's moving at night, it could be anywhere. It could be right in front of the camera, or it could be 1,000 miles away, or it could be even further than that. There's limits on how far away it can be because things don't travel faster than the speed of light. But you really can't tell at night or even the day often whether something that's moving is a few feet or a few miles away from you in some lighting circumstances. Our brains just aren't equipped to do it. Now, some equipment is, and if you can get a radar pulse off it or infrared or whatever, but then, conveniently these stories, the equipment never works. You never actually get these returns. This thing somehow evades all measurement and accountability. So it's just interesting.
Even if the equipment did work, though, you could always have a systems test where you deliberately sabotage or compromise the systems and test the battle readiness or whatever the case may be, whatever the nature of the test that you want to conduct. Although the Navy, I think, has said that it would be unspeakable if one of the other agencies in the U.S. government, perhaps another nation actor, would be doing such things. But I think it is somewhat concerning that our first instinct was to shoot. So,
Yeah. What is interesting, though, is if it isn't aliens, I think likely, and the US military know it isn't aliens, also I think likely. Um, why are they telling these stories? Tyler, you might be good at unpicking this. So let's make an assumption for a minute that it isn't aliens, and let's make another assumption. There's lots of different you could quadrant this. You could just say it is aliens, and the U.S. military know it's aliens. It is aliens, and the U.S. military don't know it's aliens, and it's not aliens and they know it, they think it's aliens and so forth. But let's go with it's not aliens and the US military know it's not aliens. You're good at coming up with hypotheses. Why would they then keep telling us these stories in that scenario? What are they kind of conditioning us for? What are they preparing for?
It's Lisa the astronaut. Can I speak?
Mhm.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. there's a lot of stuff going on, but there's one thing that is true that if you ever wanted to call it a conspiracy or not, what's inevitable, you can look at a lot of different websites, including NASA and NOAA, that tell you, hey, that the Earth is going through a polarity shift. They've been writing about this since 2012. And if the reverse polarization does exist, that means everything is east, that would be west. Everything that's north is going to be south. And anything that's inside is going to be outside. So I feel like people are looking for aliens that are up top, but then you have these aliens creatures that's coming up on land from the ocean. So I'm not sure if people are aware of these creatures that's probably never been seen before, that people are finding on their regular fishing trips or by bodies of water. But I think you should pay close
Are going
attention.
to switch.
Well, I think this speaks to another phenomenon. There is some evidence. I think some of the defense contractors have done studies showing that geological events or some sort of movement of the tectonic plates and other things can generate currents, and those currents can manifest themselves on the surface. And so that is actually very, very plausible. It's a very natural explanation. So maybe we're just running around and chasing lightning, quite literally.
Yeah, I think it's a good talk to have, and it's so crazy because people are capturing different unidentified quote unquote objects that are flying in from the skies. Even people are capturing. I think the push to even bring up those kinds of things and saying, "Hey, we don't know what these objects are," and being upfront with it is because look at how many people have Google Nest or ring lights and stuff that are capturing even fairies. Like you can literally go search on TikTok and people are seeing like fairies, and when they play their video back in slow motion, like you can't there's so many people around the world that are seeing different things. And it was so crazy because I was like, let me read about fairies. One day I just went into a bookstore and opened a book about fairies, and then I literally, there's like a fern, you know how they have the movie Fern Gully, that Peter Pan, all these different things, they talk about it and preserve the folklore of different celestial beings or things that we're not used to as human beings. And then you go back and you literally go through TikTok and look at what people are finding, and it's by a fern tree or by certain, it's just, I was flabbergasted because I would never even like put my energy into thinking stuff like that. It's just like what is and what's not is not. But then we're a part of an ecosystem now where a lot of people have stayed home because of COVID, and we're getting in touch with our environments. We're looking outside. We're paying attention to the sun. We're paying attention to the moon and stuff that we probably wouldn't look at because we're always like indoors in an office setting, and people are seeing a lot more on top of the fact that the Earth's magnetic fields and stuff are like completely changing to where they're grounding flights. Like, look how many flights have been grounded, even in the NFT space going to Miami. They grounded over 3,500 flights this past day. I'm not sure if you guys are keeping up, but there's a lot of stuff going on.
Well,
Hey,
Lisa
Lisa,
made some bold connections there.
Lisa, are you an astronaut candidate? I see. So you, is there a time when you're gonna go into space sometime?
Yeah, I'm an astronaut candidate for Space for Humanity.
So sorry, what was the last bit? I missed that. Sorry.
Space for Humanity, it's a nonprofit. And
Oh,
also
okay. All right.
people to look it up on LinkedIn. They have a couple of partnerships with SpaceX and stuff. But just a quick history: I worked for the headquarters of the Air Force, NASA, JPL, and I've been in that industry for like 12 years, I want to say.
Alrighty. That brings us to 8 minutes past the top of the hour, so we did another 2 hours. We'll aim to do that again tomorrow. So have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday, wherever you happen to be. And keep the tweets coming, and we'll do it again. Good to see you, Cal. Everybody have a wonderful day.
Hey, nice seeing you. Yeah,
All right.
good.
Thanks.